So my talk, the synopsis of the talk is like what exactly the meaning and the differential diagnosis, and the differential diagnosis. Latest diagnostic tools which are available throughout the globe, and a list of diseases in ruminants, special emphasis on the PPR when it was diagnosed in the Indian scenario or so on. Then the total accountability of about the Pestidiopetes ruminants or etiology or the pathophysiology or so on. And the challenges in the diagnosis of the disease at the field level and the differential diagnosis at the field level, I would like to emphasize in the coming slides. So what exactly the meaning of the diagnosis? The diagnosis is specifically to say is a discrimination. They are distinguishing from one to the other. That means is a literal meaning to say it is a dia means is a through, gnosis is a knowledge. Through whatever the knowledge we have learned, as I just emphasized in the beginning of the slide, whether it is a humoral theory of what we call the diseases or medicine, or it is a cellular theory of the diagnostic procedures, application of the microscopes or so on. So it's a Greek term, discriminating the one from the other, which is deviating from its normal structural and functional nature of the cell as an organ whole or so on. Today's medicine, this Greek term has been corresponding to the differential diagnosis, whether it is a human medicine or is an animal medicine or veterinary medicine. But the scenario in the global scenario right now, we can say the One Health concept. So under the One Health concept, this diagnosis is the challenges have been thrown to the scientific community to make the differential diagnosis. So right now we are in the pandemic situation. We could able to see now this what we call SARS-CoV-2 virus is associating with the other viruses and posing a different challenges to the scientific community. So what I mean to say here with this slide, it is a Greek term derived, and the literal meaning of the Greek term is application of knowledge or diagnosing the things through the knowledge what we have learned. And also it's equally important with the differential diagnosis. So as I just mentioned, it's a normal and abnormal have to be discriminated. Discrimination means it is not a discrimination of social discrimination. It is a scientific valid discrimination between the normal cell and the abnormal cell. So once you have that abundant knowledge what we have learned in the respective universities and the respective colleges. So the application aspect is a matter about the discriminating the normal tissue from that of the abnormal tissue. It's not only the tissue, the systems which are being involved. So we all know, we have been trained the clinical examination of the animals. If the ailing animal has been brought to our area, then auscultation, palpation, percussion, and so on and so forth. We just pose the questions to the farmer, then we'll arrive to a certain area, that's which system is being involved, and in the system, which organ is being involved. So in that way, so the discrimination is a scientific term, is being used to differentiate the normal system to the abnormal system, a normal organ to the abnormal organ, or so on and so forth. So recognition of the disease from its symptomatology, the animal may not express. On behalf of the animal, the owner will express, and more than that, the veterinarian who has learned the knowledge in the college or in the university or so on, and he has to visualize that by posing the question to the individual farmer or so on. So thorough knowledge is very important in this to differentiate the normal from that of the abnormal tissue or abnormal system. So now the term comes to the what we call the differential diagnosis. Differential diagnosis definitely is the biggest challenge to the entire scientific community, whether under I said it is a One Health program, whether it is a human medicine or the veterinary medicine. So what exactly the meaning of the differential diagnosis? So as I just mentioned, the definition of the diagnosis, it is a discriminating the one to the other, but the discriminating the one etiological agent from the other etiological agents which are congregated and entered into the individual host cell and causing a huge damage to the host cells and followed by the organ and the system failure. So that has to be properly addressed. Until unless if we are not in a position to differentiate the things, the animal may not recover, that put into the greatest economic loss to the farming community. So this slide, if you look at this, it is a difficult task. Look at any what to call the two images over here. So close observation is most important. A close observation with the thorough knowledge. The close observation of the suffering animal with the thorough knowledge is very, very important. Look at this first picture. If you say at a glance, that's a holistic approach, we'll see something as an old man. And we can look at this something like a young girl or child, and you can look at the things are totally different. So that is the reason why I would like to mention this. So differentiating the things. For example, a lung is being involved as a respiratory system is being involved with the different etiological agents. So which lobe is being involved and what happening inside the parenchyma of the lung or in the liver or so on and so forth. That is important. So this slide meaning it carries something like how to differentiate. The keen observation is most important. Keen observation about the clinical case, keen observation about the symptoms exhibited by the animal, and posing a relevant questions to the individual farmer to elicit the information. Based on 3, we just go into the further and to collect the material to send to the apex laboratories for the diagnosis of the disease. So what exactly the meaning of differential diagnosis is distinguishing the disease conditions from each other with the similar symptoms. So for example, respiratory symptom or respiratory system is being involved. There are a number of diseases which we are going to see that number of diseases which are the etiological agents which lodged into the upper respiratory tract or the lower respiratory tract and which make the damage to the what we call the lung parenchyma or in fact the entire respiratory system in due course if it is not properly addressed. If you have failed to diagnose that, if you have failed to differentiate the what we call the pattern of the disease and exact or you can say a suitable therapy cannot be administered to the individual animals or a flock together if a morbidity is more. If the morbidity is more, that is a basic duty of the veterinarian, particularly the field veterinarian, to differentiate that and isolation of the animals. They overcrowded, definitely any contagious disease, as I'm going to talk on the PPR, is a highly contagious disease. Not only this, there are a number of respiratory diseases, viral origin or the bacterial origin or the mycoplasma or so on and so forth. There's a chlamydial origin. They're highly contagious in nature. So how we are going to differentiate them and how we are going to isolate the animals from the healthy animals as a morbid cases, so the morbidity cases. So once you have very comfortable, then the isolation identification of the things, then it is very easy to handle the cases and treat the animals to help the farming community. So I would like to mention over here the sheep and goat. It is in the what to call it's a triangle manner. So it's with the farmer, whether it's a shepherd or the traditional shepherd or the what to call nowadays people are coming into the sheep farming and goat farming. The literate people are also coming into this. So here it is, the animal is suffering, definitely it is in the transboundary of 3 important domains. When the animal is suffering, definitely the farmer will approach the expert. As I'm mentioning that a veterinary doctor is a veterinary scientist working in the field. He's an expert. His word is the final word to the farming community to save his animals. So for which his knowledge is very important and application is very, very important. So differential diagnosis by using different diagnostic methods, which I'm going to mention now, that is very important to say to boost the economy of the individual farming community. So as far as what we have learned in the during our courses or during our studies or what we are importing are the field veterinarians who are training even the para-veterinarians or the youngsters also. The veterinarians, senior veterinarians are also involving the training of the young veterinarians. So they have their idea and we have our own idea. One is the anamnesis. This is a very, very important area. The knowledge, the abundant knowledge what we have learned. As I just mentioned in the previous 2 slides, the keen interest, how we are going to make that it is only by taking the history. So history taking is an art. So 50% of your diagnosis, 50% of your diagnosis is associated with how we are getting the history. History, I would like to mention about the individual animal history, the flock history, the history as a whole of the particular village or the mandal or the area or district or so on and so forth, or state. So each state is not unique. The diseases which are being spreading in each state is not similar. And the same way, taken a unit as a village. In the village, one flock may suffer with the sheep pox or the goat pox. One flock may suffer with the CCPP. One flock may suffer with the what to call, or for so the exanthemars, one and so forth. So the history taking and differentiating the things within the village, within the boundary is very, very important. So apart from this, the other things what we have learned, like a clinical diagnosis, is the thing what you are going to pose the question to the individual farmer by keen observe, what to call, focusing on the animal, the suffering animal, ailing animal, which will brought to you, or you are going to the animal or the flock. So that is a clinical observation of a veterinarian, is a field scientist, is more important. So once you have the coupled with anamnesis and the clinical observation, then you will be executing your duty by collecting the suitable material to send it to the laboratory, which we can say the laboratory diagnosis. Till that time, you are going to wait, but you are not going to wait. You have to safeguard the animals to a certain extent based on your clinical diagnosis and the previous history, or you can say the epidemiological survey otherwise. So based on that, you start the treatment. So once you start the treatment, it comes for the fourth one, as I said, mentioned as a therapeutic diagnosis. It's a veterinary medicine. In fact, in the human medicine, hit and trial things are going on there. The best example, the COVID-19, number of what to call antibiotics have been used, antiviral drugs have been used, and nothing is working. We all know evidence in that. So that what we like to say is a technical knowledge, technical know-how. We say it's a therapeutic diagnosis. You give a long-acting what to call oxytetracycline. If it is not responding, we may switch over to the other quinolone groups. If it is properly responding, definitely you are going to treat the animal until you are not going to wait to receive the laboratory diagnostic what to call opinion. So then that way that usually being said that this is a therapeutic diagnosis. And the tentative diagnosis is based on your visual observation or your clinical observation, whatever I just mentioned about the other three important diagnostic tools what we are used. In despite of this, if morbidity is being reduced, but mortality is being increased, or there are few animals are being died within the flock, definitely you are subjected for the conducting the post-mortem examination. This is the visualizing the changes triggered in the different systems or different organs, little scoop down if you are in a position to see that the patchy areas of the different organs. So post-mortem diagnosis is being done. Is the confirmatory diagnosis is being done only after receiving the laboratory inputs, what you have submitted the diagnostic or the clinical samples to the Apex laboratory. If animals are being died and the post-mortem examination, so based coupled all these things, so you are going for the confirmatory diagnosis. You will give your final opinion and to save the animals or so. But at this area, now the challenge is that differential diagnosis. I'll give you a simple example. That, for example, I have my own experience where the in one village, the flock was suffering a lot. Mortality was more than 80%. Besides that, the other shepherds are not communicating with him. Is not they are not treating him as their own society member. So he was suffering a lot. Once we sit, what to call entered into the area, when we conducted the postmortem, it's a multiple, it's a museum of what to call the diseases. The respiratory system is showing something different lesions, and the abomasum is showing something different parasites, and the abomasal junction will have its own way, the crawling of the immature amphistomes. So it's all depends upon the how we are training the people, the senior veterinarians, the senior field scientists are in a position based on their experience, the differential diagnosis based on their experience and the laboratory assistance. It is easy to make the things. So as I said, in the field conditions, usually we go to the farming community, we look at the animal and we just pose the questions and we usually listen to the individual farmers. So one side you are observing the animal with your own knowledge, what you have learned, and you are applying your scientific knowledge to the towards the ailing animal to elicit the information. You are interacting with the other flock or other farmers or so on and so forth. So at the same time, you are touching the animal. As we know the clinical practice, clinical the palpation, percussion, and auscultation. So you are going to look into that, what is happening inside the body by using available tools, to extensively you want to have the information from the entire flock or to that particular pocket, whether it is a village or the mandal area or so on and so forth. It's not only farmers. Primarily, you are interacting with the farmers and also with the co-veterinarians, and you have your own way of making things and to make your opinion to express. If deaths are occurred, definitely it is subjected for the postmortem examination. So for which you need to have a sound knowledge about anatomy, pathology, and microbiology, and so on and so forth. Not only that, the physiology is also very, very important area. So once you conduct the postmortem and evisceration of the organs, I'm not going to touch that area. It's ultimately you are going to, at the field level, you are going to conduct the postmortem and you are going to collect the material, suitable material, into a suitable, what you call the preservatives and the transport medium. These are very, very important. If you do not have a proper transport medium, for example, you want to have to send a material for the virus isolation. If you are failed to collect in a PPR case, is a mesenteric lymph node, definitely you are missing it. If you are failed to collect the apical lobe, which is being totally consolidated, you are just totally failure. But you are well aware of that, the particular component have to be collected and how you have to send, that you have to be aware of that. A proper, what you call, transport medium is most important. If you do not have a, what you call, ice packs, it's a difficult task to reach that material to the laboratory for its virus isolation or so on and so forth. So there are a number of, what you call, tests are available throughout the globe. If you have the differential diagnosis, these are all the latest tests. For example, isolation identification, of course, it is, we are learning the, what you call, during our what you call, the period of learning the veterinary medicine, but now it has been triggered to the shifted to the dramatically, it's a very great shift has been taken place. Is a modern diagnostic tools have come up, that they are the like nucleic acid amplification techniques are there, and also the recombinant what you call antigen techniques are there. You can say the biosensors have come. So at least up to this, seeing is believing. In addition to the microscopy, all ancillary techniques are available to make the confirmatory diagnosis, to receive the challenges posed by the geological agents to the scientific community. But they need to have a special knowledge, a special exposure, and a special training is required. Of course, this what we have learned is all veterinarians might be knowing this, how to collect the material for isolation and identification and the serological analysis. Up to here, I think the field veterinarians are very much familiar and they have their own knowledge. So how to collect the blood, how to separate the serum, how to send it to the Apex laboratories. The similar way, how to collect the sterile swabs. So in this connection, I would like to mention that we need not have the, what you call, a sterile, what you call, a laminar airflow at the field level, for which we have to use the simple way to say is a spirit lamp and a cotton, if not. So have a dip into the spirit and light that and expose it. So what you call spatula or so on and so forth, whatever you are doing, even the knife or the scissors, you just expose it and make an incision and get the swab. If swabs are not available, the earbuds are very enough to collect that and put it into a proper, what you call, sterile test tube. If sterile test tubes are not available, Ziploc covers are enough to collect it. The similar way, the serological for the blood collection, of course, even the nuclear corner, the vacuotiners are available. They can collect that and send it to the Apex laboratories. So nucleic acid or nucleic amplification techniques or recombinant, what you call, antigen techniques, or you can say the advanced as a lab test, or you can say the loop mediated isothermal tests, or so on and so forth, or the biosensors are being a big boon to the diagnostic techniques, or so on and so forth, the available things. As far as this review article, so that the field in most of the institutions in India might be having definitely the microscope, the light microscopy level, as I said, is but the collection of material for bacteriological analysis, the swabs, or you can say the impression smears, or so on, is very easy for the field veterinarians to make the differential diagnosis by using these simple staining techniques like the Leishman stain, Giemsa stain, combination of Leishman and Giemsa is very, very simple way to say. By using light microscopy, they can make the difference. And at the higher level of the what you call the microscopy studies, like a fluorescent dye using, or you can say electron microscopy or cytometry, or so on and so forth. The other techniques are just a previous slide. I just mentioned that it is a special equipment is required and a special training is required, special exposure is required. And no veterinarian is inferior to learn these things. I think I have my own experience with the field veterinarians, work for the 20 years, are very good expert in the cytometry, are very good expert in the what you call running a RT-PCR, mission or so on and so forth. So it is not that it's a time and exposure that is very important for us. So these are the different tools which are available all over the globe. I mean the referral laboratories for particularly the PPR and so on and so forth. So I would like to mention, I'll get back. It is a very old, of course. It's available literature. It's in the introductory remarks. Chief Justice mentioned that the PPR in the Tamil Nadu was identified, and it is rampant. It has been totally distributed all over India. And if you look at the epidemiological survey, that is a bit different. Now I am entering into the proper of the pathophysiology or etiology of the Festidae petit ruminants as a PPR in small ruminants. So as far as the synonyms are concerned, it is popularly known as a goat plague. So we have our own experience. When I was working with the Department of Animal Husbandry, when we have seen the first case of the PPR in the sheep, there was a debate. It is the goat plague. It will affect only goat, it's not the sheep. Over a period of time, the most of the flocks in India, all states have been experienced that sheep and goat are being involved. It is like a pseudo rinderpest, though the rinderpest has been eradicated. I just involved in the ORZ program, Operation Rinderpest Zero program, and the outbreaks have been seen in the sheep, which was dilemma that is a PPR or not. Then people are suspecting that it might be a rinderpest. So it is a very simple way to say it is stomatitis pneumoenteritis complex. So two systems are predominantly involved, and the other countries, they usually say them different names. So as far as the clinical signs are concerned, and field veterinarians are highly experienced with that, is that pyrexia will be there. So we all know that there are different 4 phases of the disease: entry level and inflammatory level and status level and declining level, or so on and so forth. During the viremia stage, definitely it gets shoots out. So farmer is not in a position to recognize the ailing animal in the beginning of the first 2 days or 3 days. Once the incubation period is being crossed, the multiplication of the organisms in the respective system or the organ, then definitely that results in a different way. So oculonasal discharges is a very glaring, what you call the clinical side usually being seen, and necrotic stomatitis, pneumogastroenteritis. These are the conspicuous or pathognomonic, it's not the pathognomonic to say, a conspicuous, what you call clinical signs usually being noticed by the farmer even. So before the observation of the farmer, if the veterinarian is recognized at very early stage, definitely it is useful to the farmer. So if you look at the epidemiological survey, in the 1942, 40s, it's a very small pocket of the world in Africa. It was there, it was recognized. It's a very good old disease. It's a very good old disease. To look at the location, later on it has been spread into the different parts of the Africa, and later on, 89, it has been entered into the India. Now, there are 4 different lineages. Lineage 1, 2, 3, and 4. The next slide I'll focus upon. And the lineage 4 is predominantly distributed all over the world. So this is the epidemiological map, how the type of lineages which are being distributed through the what you call world, and it is a biggest challenge. As it is said, it is a important economical disease of the farming community or the people who are rearing the animals. So lineage wise, I'm not a biotechnologist. So how to construct this is otherwise we get the family history, a family tree of the what you call the PPR virus. It is beginning from the 1810 to 2010. The available information in the review article, just I would like to mention the lineage 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4 lineages is as previous slide you have seen that. As far as the transmission and other things are concerned, transmission is a close contact. We all are being evidenced that's overcrowding. So COVID-19, people are saying the 3 important issues. This is be in your confined area, isolate yourself. So once the morbidity is there, isolation is very, very important, even in the PPR case, or in fact, any viral infection, otherwise any infectious diseases. So isolation, identification and isolation of the animals, avoid the overcrowding. So one animal is being affected definitely through the sneezing, through the coughing, through the what you call contamination of the feed and water channels or whatever the equipment we are using, then definitely it is going to be affected. The upper respiratory tract and conjunctiva, they disseminate the viruses into the environment. They get percolates or it gets attached to the other flock or so. It is very very speedy, what to call, organism which enter into the different hosts, and recovered animals will act as a chronic carriers. Recovered animals are otherwise a silent carriers. So we are just listening the same words in the COVID-19. There are silent carriers. Apart from that, the large ruminants, I'll focus later, the large ruminants and wild animals are also silent carriers for the PPR virus. And the incidence is a very seasonal. Of course, it is a different countries, different states, different districts, and the shifting system of the disease is a bit different. The incubation period is very few days, then it's things are different. So as far as the virus family is concerned, it is like a different family, like it's a Paramyxoviridae. It is like a single stranded RNA virus, is a Morbilli virus. And single stranded RNA virus is a highly deceiving virus, having great capacity for the mutations, If you look at the different types of antigens or the proteins which are there over the surface area and the nucleocapsid of this single stranded RNA virus, it has just, I would like to say, for the information purpose, is the N, P, M, and F, which are the very, very pathogenic in nature, how they are going to make the pathology over a period of time. So in that, this is a real picture, which is like, it gives like what to call herringbone-like appearance. Is a herringbone fish, is a very specific, it is a V-shaped or it is a zigzag appearance of the what to call the bone. In that way, the focus is being made. This is a cytosol nearby the nucleus. The virus is being focused over the with the electron microscopy or so. So as far as the what to call the spread of the information or the infection or the disease is concerned, it's the sheep and goat equally, they are being involved, and young animals are highly susceptible. So once you enter into the flock and getting the information, the age and the sex of the animals are very, very important, and particularly young animals, if they are suffering or showing any clinical signs, you have to suspect. And the cattle and pigs are also, they affected, and they become harbor the virus, and they become a subclinical nature, and they are the deadly host, and they act as a carriers. So once you see the pathogenesis, so once it enters to the upper respiratory mucosa, because of the proteins which are there at the surface of the virus, they attach with the receptor binding domain of the individual cells at the upper respiratory mucosa. They enter into the lower respiratory mucosa, enter into the alveolar cells. And dendritic cells, macrophages, monocytes, which are supposed to fight with that, but they act as a vehicle. They act as a vehicle with the help of the different interferons. They enter into the through lymphatic channels into the nearby or the regional lymph nodes. So once it enters into the regional lymph nodes, they just multiply and then disseminating into the remote way with the lymphatic organs. So lymphatic organs like as a lymph node, it's the spleen or the Peyer's patches of the large intestine or the epithelial cells of the gastrointestinal tract, or any other resident phagocytic cells of the different systems, including endocrine system. It enters into the way how it's a culprit is a droplet. It is through the sneezing, through the coughing. The virus enter into the upper respiratory mucosa, they travel into the lower respiratory tract, and they use the ready-made, ready reckoner, the cells which are supposed to fight against the virus. They use as a carrier, as a vehicle, through the interferons. By blocking that its normal function, it reaches to the soil. The soil is a fertile soil for the organisms for its multiplication. From there, once it is reached to a matured level, they enter into the disseminating or into the nearest what to call a resident phagocytic system of the different systems. So that way, in the way how it gets made. This is a little more inside how the entry usually takes place by the receptor binding domain. Once it enters into that, it gets uncoating and it gets released. That means integration of the genetic material of virus with the genetic material of the host cell. Then use this machinery. Usually this machinery is being used for the metabolism and the cell metabolic function. That machinery is being hijacked by the organism, and it gets started proliferating, and it assembles all the proteins in a systematic manner. How the protein synthesis usually being done, how it gets excreted through the pores of the cell into the system to serve the purpose that is being hijacked by the pathogen. Cleverly, it is being used the established system by the nature, and it assemble all the proteins, they converted into a proper what you call a virion or virus-like particle. This enters into the released into the one cell to the other cell, start spreading into the different systems. Thereby, the animal will suffer and will die in due course. This I do not have much idea because I'm not a biotechnologist. For the benefit of the what you call my colleagues, I would like to mention that how the genome sequencing usually being done, the different proteins are so on and so forth. So once you look at the clinical signs, as I just mentioned, is oculonosal discharges, swelling of the eyelids, or you can say the crest formation at the area of the nostrils, or if it is reached to the 6th day or the 7th day, definitely there is a diarrhea. A bloody diarrhea will be there in young animals, or shooting diarrhea will be there. The swelling of the what you call the anus area usually being seen. And look at that, even the bottle jaw condition will come across because it is going to interfere with the protein metabolism of the individual cells. It's a hypoproteinemia condition usually being seen. Look at the things in the different systems as I just mentioned. The buccal cavity is going to be involved, and it's a brown-like deposition usually being seen. It's not like ulceration, what we are going to see that in the foot and mouth disease. That is like what you call erosions will be there, a deep-seated like a cup-like lesions can be seen in the foot and mouth disease, but brown-like deposition usually being seen in the buccal cavity of the affected animal. So look at the same way I am mentioning in a different what you call, I have gathered this in a different source. So look at this conjunctiva, reddishness, and look at this is a hyperemia condition, very early stage. Once the goblet cells in the upper respiratory mucosa is being triggered and lot of mucus is being synthesized abnormally, that will enter into the upper respiratory channel and it gets occluded into that. The animal will start a difficulty in breathing. Slowly these virus, abundant number, they just descend down into the lower respiratory tract and it enters into the alveoli level, then cause the damage into the lower respiratory tract. So as far as the gross pathology is concerned, once you conduct the postmortem, the organs or the systems which are being involved is very important. As I said, the lungs are going to be involved primarily and followed by the digestive system, pneumogastroenteritis. It's all very, the name itself is being seen. So very severe enteritis will be seen. We are looking at this, but this has to be, of course, it's not given in any literature. It has to be differentiated from the enterotoxemia in young animals. But I would like to mention that it has to be, when you are talking about the PPR, you please look at the kidneys. When the severe, what you call the congestion and hyperemia of the entire GI tract is there, then the consolidation of the lungs, particularly apical lobe, which is having a direct branch of the bronchiole, to that it gets consolidated because of the gravity also, and it gets consolidated. Once you take a piece of lung and put into the water, it gets sink into the water or so on. And look at the mesenteric lymph nodes, how it gets enlarged. In the beginning, the previous slides, I just mentioned how it is disseminating from the what you call regional lymph nodes of the respiratory system. Once it is totally the soil, as I said, it gets a seeded n number and gets released and disseminated into the other phagocytic system of the body, including the pH patches of the large intestine. So the organs usually being involved, as I said, is a trachea. It is my field experience. I just mentioned the previous way. Trachea, lung, liver, abomasum, small intestines, and the spleen, lymph nodes are being involved. If you just cut open the area, very severe congestion of the tracheal mucosa usually being seen, and a very reddish appearance of the stage of congestion, stage of red hepatization of the lungs usually being seen. The similar way, if you look at the, as I said, is a single lobe apical lobe. This is a complete consolidation usually being seen. As in the beginning, I just mentioned any pathogen is not a single entity, please. Once the immunocompromising is being started, the all other which are there, bacteria or other microbes, will take its own upper hand, starts producing, acting on its own way, and that makes the congregation and leads to the other abnormal things in the different organs. So once you cut open this area, definitely, I'm not mentioning, whenever you are conducting the post-mortem, please have there are thumb rules are there, shape, size, color, consistency, weight, and cut surface of the organ is most important. So all these things will speak something about the abnormalities of the organs or the cell or so on and so forth. Is the liver involvement, the gallbladder is being filled with the bile because it is not being used properly, as it is going to be affecting the metabolic process of the different organs, different cells in the body. So it's abomasum. There is a very severe congestion of abomasum, and abomasal folds are true. And look at this, is a congestion of the small intestine area. It's not exactly to the space patches, but the a longitudinal, a ropey appearance of the intestines I do come across. So look at the zebra markings in the large intestines, and particularly in the rectum. So this has to be properly differentiated. Jones disease even. So that is a totally different how the cachectic condition, going down condition. But in PPR case, it is not the going down condition for the long time. It is a very short period. The animal will die within a weekdays, if it is very severe. So organ-wise, if I would just I'll browse it. It is like a histopathology as a being a pathologist. So edema. Look at this, is not supposed to have a septa. Septa is totally collapsed. It is filled with the blood cells, including erythrocytes, and the luminal structures are being filled with the edema fluid, and organ, the capillaries are fluid with the blood. It is not exchanging. There is no oxygenation process. Animal will die definitely. The bronchiole, you can see that totally filled with the blood tinged exudate. And epithelial cells will be under hyperplasia because the goblet cells in this area are going to be proliferated, and a lot of what you call mucus is going to be sealed. And look at the microscopic structure little more. These are the virions. Otherwise, you can say the inclusion bodies, intranuclear inclusion bodies. The defense system is working. One cell is not in a position to define it. So there is a good article. There are good articles. The mitochondria will talk to each other. Different cells are also talk to each other through chemical mediator endocrine system. How to fight against the enemy which entered into their domain, but they fail to do that. In those cases, they club together. They try to minimize the spread of the infection. But even despite of the giant cell formation as a part of immune system, they fail to do it. The organism will take an upper hand. They make the things, they completely destroy the cell nucleus. That's a missionary of the thing. So you can see the liver is a severe what you call parenchyma loss. So liver parenchyma is totally different. It is totally destroyed. And look at this severe what you call infiltration of inflammatory cells. It speaks something about early entry of the bacterial infection or so on and so forth. Even in the organ like liver also, we could come across the intranuclear inclusion bodies. And in the spleen, which is one of the graveyard. So the fate of the erythrocytes, and you can see the hemorrhage in the spleen itself. Then the hyalinization of the capillaries of the spleen is another area where I have seen like a hyperplasia of the red cell, or you can say the depletion of the lymphoid follicle in the spleen is one of the important defense organ or so. So edematous condition of the spleen area and also the hyalinization of the capillaries. Look at this, the trabecula is totally destroyed, which is the one which has to maintain the structural integrity usually being maintained with that. So the heart is being involved. You can look at that as a condition. It's a bacterial emboli. Bacterial emboli is a secondary bacterial infection was seen in the same case. So kidney is being involved. The glomerular filter bed mechanism is totally altered. What I mean to say here is, so all organs are one after other, they are going to be involved. See the edema of the abomasum. What you have seen the grass slide is all like a smooth area. It's all otherwise is a mucus is being secreted by the irritating goblet cells in the mucus area. You can see the proliferation of the goblet cells. How does? So they release more amount of the mucus. So despite all the what you call in addition to the histopathological examination, it's not my slide, it's from the other article. So the syncytial moss is a clever, so it never yield to the what you call the phagocytic activity. There will be dormitory in stage and it gets enmossed into that. It has been tagged with the special dyes and the immunohistochemistry. So in the different what you call defense organs, the author has been studied and focused how the particles are being engulfed into the area. It is another technique is being used, of course, it's not at the field level, it's at the laboratory level. So it's all the red and the white dyes are being used. How to, it is in the cell lines. The organs which are being collected from the field outbreaks, isolated. Once it is being confirmed, it has been induced into the cell lines and cell line studies have been made into this. So the diagnosis aspect is a clinical diagnosis, most important to the field veterinarians with your own experience and learn knowledge what you have made. And the collection of the clinical material is very, very important when you are coming across the what you call the outbreak attendance or so. The preservation, transportation, I just mentioned previously, and postmortem examination and morbid material collection for Apex laboratory and compiling of all these information. You are alone, you are single, you are the master, you are the scientist to the farming community. And you have to associate, and luckily you have a very good platform like zero grazing, like CLEP, and to discuss, to exchange the views, to make a conclusion. It's a very good platform. I think I'll extend my sincere thanks to the organizers making this is in a different way. So materials at the field level to be collected like a blood or the serum, or you can say mesenteric lymph nodes in case of postmortem examination or eyes, and tissues in the neutral buffered formalin for the pathological or you can say immunohistochemistry or so on and so forth. And the tests which are being executed in the different laboratories is like ELISA and the PCR is a latest test, and a fluorescent dye what you have seen earlier. So any disease usually being followed this. So if you are in a position to identify the disease at this area, definitely animal will be survived because it is a reversible action. If our intervention with your low knowledge and your experience and your collaborative and correlative work, exchange of knowledge will save the animal at the reversible damage of the cell. If it is being crossed this barrier, definitely the animal will go into in a different way. And you are going to see this, the grass pathology, which effect is like straight away cell injury will lead to the death of the animal. So all these changes, what I have just mentioned, whether it's electron microscopy or light microscopy or the cellular levels at the different molecular techniques, what we are going to execute at this level. But it is the field veterinarian, please, it is my sincere request to all. Try to have acquired the knowledge with a lot of information is available in the net. Everyone will have its mobile in the what to call the hand. Look at that, have these save the animals at the reversible action. And if once it is crossed the irreversible action, mitochondrial damage is taking place, or you can say the missionary activity like the nucleus is being damaged. The pathogen is highs of the normal metabolic activity of the cell, animal will not survive this. So for this has to be differentiated. Number of diseases are no. It has to be differentiated for the rinderpest, which is totally eradicated from India. It is a free from rinderpest under ORZ. Blue tongue, number of pathogens, number of what you call lineages are there. One lineage in one state like Tamil Nadu may not be the same the lineage of the Rajasthan or the northeastern states. And the contagious theme of the earth. It's a challenge, biggest challenge, not only with the PPR, it also with the sheep pox and foot and mouth disease. The big missionary is going on there with the government of India. The what do you call the other hot water, the coccidiosis, young animals as I mentioned. And I'm not much experienced with the mineral poisoning. And we have another disease like a CCP and Pasteurellosis, Pasteurella hemolytica. So these diseases have to be properly differentiated. I have tried my level best with my field experience and the different review articles which I have gone through. Make it that the oral cavity involvement, PPR, I just mentioned over here. This, I think organizers may upload this for the benefit of each and everyone. So the 3 place, 2 place, and plus and minus question mark. I just mentioned how to make the differentiation. The different systems are being involved. I did not mention about the pyrexia. As the field veterinarians are very much aware of that. So kindly look this as a ready recognized table. So how the PPR, RP, blue tongue, foot and mouth, or CCPP and Pasteurella hemolytica, Pasteurellosis and coccidiosis. have to be properly differentiated by using the light microscope or so and so forth. If you look at the lungs of a PPR, is different. It is yellowish tinge. It's a bronchopneumonia usually being seen. It is totally filled with the what we call pleuropneumonia. Because of the pleuropneumonia, there are impressions of the ribs over the inflamed lung in case of CCPP. Foot and mouth, we have seen that is an involvement of the tongue. The erosions in the tongue is different. It may not be the feature with the PPR. It may not be the feature with the PPR. The buccal cavity is being involved. The gums are going to be involved and lips are going to be involved. It's not the tongue. In a similar way, I would like to mention that about the blue tongue cornets. Locomotor system is being involved. The very biggest feature, apart from the oral cavity, what to call inflammatory lesions in the blue tongue. Blue tongue usually being seen in this way. The blue tongue I have come across the complete loss of the fur. It's all the wool has been lost in the over a period of time the recovered animals. So this is like differentiation. I think it's all a downloaded literature. So these are the milestones. In the beginning, it's like a virus identification with the agar-gel precipitation test. Slowly, it has been escalated up to the molecular level diagnostic techniques. I just previously have mentioned over that. So these are the different tests which are being executed in the reference laboratory to eradicate the disease on a missionary basis. So now I'm not mentioning this. It's for the benefit of the participants, the number of tests which are being executed at the national laboratory, the Bhopal, few of them are being executed, and OIE reference laboratories in a different identified countries, they are executing the job. Prophylaxis is very easy to say that surveilling sheep, and it has to be what you call immunization. So previously we used to have RP vaccine to protect the cross immunization or having that thought, and nowadays we have a very good vaccine for the PPR or so on and so forth. This is the global missionary, is under the OIE. People are attending this with the help of the FAO, OIE, even it is being tagged with the One Health program. Now, these are not only the domestic animals like sheep and goat. All wild animals are also being involved. These are the references, the latest references are there even. So different animals are being involved in different countries. So it's the biggest threat in future. If it gets modified, it gets genetic reassortment possibility is there. I'm not making that it may undergo, but it's a challenge to the field of veterinarians, even the scientific community, how to address this. So with this, I would like to extend my sincere thanks. So whatever with permission, without permission, I have downloaded number of review articles, and I have contacted through emails a few people to make use of their what we call publications. I am sincerely extending my sincere thanks for their permission and the scientific community of the global area to present all these into the befitting manner. So this is a very good saying. It's a William Boyd. Definitely, it's the biggest message to all veterinarians. I'm not saying as a pathologist I mentioned over this.